Hi, my name is Angie. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. This is a channel where I mostly like to do book reviews as well as homeschool reviews, mostly on book content. And so thank you for stopping in. This video is going to focus on my January wrap-up, which is basically what I read this past month and what I liked, what I didn't like. And so the first book I read, actually I mostly read in December, kind of over our break, but I finished it up January 1st. And that book is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is an outstanding book. It is about two sisters as World War II is starting. They live in France. It tells the story through the point of view of the women. I think that may be why it was so affecting and so relatable for me. Of the two sisters, I felt the most drawn to Vianne. She's the one that is married, and her husband is sent off to be a part of the French army, and she has a daughter, and it's told to include her hardships left at home. Her hardships of like having a Nazi soldier live with her. That was common in the occupied areas throughout Europe for the Nazis to live with the women and children, and that added just a complexity that was just heart-wrenching. And I think heart-wrenching because it's hard for me not to put myself in her shoes and be like, what would I do? How would I care for my children? Isabel is the younger sister, and she has a more rebellious spirit, and I didn't really like her character at first. I thought she was a little bit more flat, if you will, but her character definitely progresses and grows. Her story is remarkable, and just the lengths at which she went to fight and to not just survive, which is more Vivian's approach, although there are some amazing aspects to her story that aren't just survival, but Isabel is definitely the fighter. It's a 5-star book for me because it really affected my heart. It affected how I viewed that time period in the war, and it just gave people and personalized the war in a way that I have never read about before. And I'm still thinking about it, and I told my husband all about it, and all these things that just it was just a very affecting book for me. The next book I read was These Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly. It's about a girl. She's from a wealthy family in New York City, the end of the 1800s. And so she lives during a time when the expectation of women, especially in her class, was to get married and have babies, and that was it. And she pushed against that, and I think that is why I really liked this book. I liked her character a lot. The book basically opens with her father's suicide, which she doesn't believe to be a suicide, and she starts looking into it. And she meets a man at the newspaper her uncle runs, and they start forming a friendship. And there is some romance, which at first I was like, oh, I hope there's no romance, but I actually liked it. It felt like a real attraction. Like it wasn't too superficial. I really liked her character, and then as she goes through the process of discovering more about her father's death, she just digs deeper in a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff becomes revealed. And I highly recommend it. It's a good mystery. I gave it 4 stars, but only because nearing the end I was pretty sure I knew who did it. Very good. I really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend These Shallow Graves. All right, the next book I read was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So this is another beloved book of BookTube, and I realized that people read this in 2013 or something like that, but it is 2020, and I am getting to it. It's a story about two people, Celia and Marco, and they've been kind of brought up and trained for a competition, a magical competition. There's a lot of things about kind of how the book is set up and the competition that are just kind of confusing, but I guess not confusing, it's just not explained. And I think that's part of what makes this book good, is because it is very interesting, and you're trying to figure out how it works. You're trying to figure out how is it going to play out, what's going to happen. So it wasn't really fast-paced. It was a book I couldn't put down. The beautiful part about the book, the atmosphere, the fact that the author really made me feel like I was there, made me feel like I was attending the Night Circus, and I was smelling these amazing aromas of cinnamon popcorn or going into these exhibits. And I really liked that aspect of it. The romance, so I forgot to mention these two characters, Celia and Marco, are competing against each other, but it got complicated when they fell in love, which at first I really didn't like. I thought the romance was too fast. It was like, no, you don't love her yet. Like, that's not how this works. But as the book progressed, I began to believe it more. I'm really glad I read it. I really enjoyed the characters, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere, and I really enjoyed not really knowing what was going on and discovering it as the book progressed. I thought that was really interesting. So I do really recommend it. I mean, it is one of the books that everybody seems to really love. So I read it and I liked it. Okay, to go on, let's see what's next on my list. I finished Introverted Mom, and I loved it. It's a really good book. It's Introverted Mom by Jamie C. Martin, and the little subtitle is Your Guide to More Calm, Less Guilt, and Quiet Joy, which I can't think of any mom that wouldn't like those three things. She's a homeschooling mom, and so she reads a lot to her kids. She actually has a different book called Give Your Child the World that basically is a big book list of different books from around the world. And so she enjoys books and she enjoys reading, and I just resonate with her on that. She also uses in her book, she uses 4 famous authors as examples of introvertedness. She uses L.M. Montgomery, she uses Jane Austen, she uses, Louise May Alcott and Laura Ingalls Wilder. So as kind of examples, and then to draw from their life to show how they thrived within their introverted nature, and that introvertedness is a gift. It's a gift to our kids. It's a gift to the people around us, even though it can be more challenging in certain ways, especially when it comes to young children and motherhood. So it's a really good resource. It's a very uplifting, an uplifting resource that just talks about the idea that you are the way you are, and it's a gift. And even if we have a society that tends to appreciate extroverts more than introverts, there are so many gifts that introverts can give. I do recommend picking up this book. It's full of a lot of good little nuggets. So 5-star for this one, for sure. All right, I have 2 more. Okay, just finished this book, Homegoing by Yael Gassi. It's a book that covers a number of generations. I think it was somewhere of like 8 or 9 generations, ranging from starting in Africa, mostly ending in the United States, starting during the time of slaving, of when Europeans would come and capture. There's some hard stuff in here. Some African people and put them on slave ships. An interesting aspect to this book, which I wasn't sure if I would like, is it's told, every chapter is told from a different person's point of view as you go down the family tree, the genealogy, from the very first set of sisters, where one marries a white slaver and stays in Africa, the other gets put on a slave ship and sent to the American South, and then it follows her daughter and her son, and then his daughter, sort of thing, as it goes through, leading up until I think the 1980s. It was kind of the last couple chapters. The book was really good at captivating the feelings of a person living at that time, or help the reader walk in someone else's shoes, even though it's a culture or a time frame that I didn't know very much about. And so I felt like I learned a lot, and I felt a lot, and there's a lot of injustice and a lot of hard stories to read. But what I really did like about it was, even if there are some chapters where you're like, oh, most of this chapter is just heartbreaking, the people that are portrayed also just have such strength. They have such strength, and they have such a hope. And maybe some of them don't have as much hope as others, but it is, it's also very beautiful what people can endure and still remain themselves and not be broken, if you will. So this is a very powerful book. It's very hard to read. It's very hard to read book, but it's a very worthwhile book. But I really do like it. So another 5-star for me. So the last book I finished up this past month was The Beekers of 141st Street by Karina von Glasser. And my kids and I, this was our read aloud that we read over snack time. And it's a story of a family, the Beeker family, who live in Harlem, and their landlord is not renewing their lease. So they're a family that has been in the neighborhood for a long time. The father grew up there. They know all their neighbors. They're very loved in their neighborhood, and they can't afford to stay in Harlem if they have to look for another place. And so 5 days before Christmas, their landlord says, no, you have to be out by the end of the year. No explanation. And the story is really good. It's told mostly from the viewpoint of the 5 children, I think they range in age from 4 to 12. And you get to see their antics. Right? They want to convince their landlords that they are lovely people and they need to stay. And they do some things that are like, oh, that wasn't a good idea, or that really backfired. But they do it from a childlike understanding and assumptions that I think are really, really good. And it was a good book to read with my kids because there was a lot of times of pausing and being like, well, do you think Oliver made a good choice when he decided to do that? Or what would you have done differently? Or why do you think the landlord is behaving like this? Is there potential that he's not just grumpy, but that there's something else going on? And so it's beautiful. And actually the twist, kind of the like something else going on, if you will, caught me by surprise. It was really well written. I didn't see it coming, and it was very beautiful. It kind of actually made me cry, and my kids were like, when I was reading there, they're like big eyes, like, oh my gosh, that's what happened. And so it was well received. Like, even though maybe my kids could have been a little older to read this, I feel like it would have been a little bit better in the 8, 9, 10 range. They still really enjoyed it, and they really enjoyed kind of the end and how it wrapped up. And so highly recommend this. This is a great book for around Christmas time. I really love this. This is a great middle grade, I guess, book that, but for me, it was a great read aloud for my kids. It was mostly for my 6-year-old. He understood the most. So, and he loved it. He thought it was really good. Okay. So yes, thank you for sticking around and watching my first ever reading wrap up. It's really fun. It causes me to actually think about my books, to have to explain them, and I don't feel like I have quite the words yet, but I will get better, I'm sure. So thank you for listening, and if you have read any of those books, please comment below, or if you think there are some books that are similar to these ones that you think I would like, I would also love any recommendations. And please consider liking and subscribing. That really helps me, and I feel very supported, and it's just a fun community. So yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day. All right, take care. Bye.